Whenever you're ready, Shema.
Yes. So good day, everyone, whether it's a morning or an afternoon. So we would like to thank you on behalf of Sheikh Khalifa program to be with us today. We will be introducing the government excellence model, the revived model. So it's the GEM2. And we have with us Professor Mohammed Zairi. He's the guru of the international field of total quality and excellence management. We would also like to hear from you at the end of this session, and we would like to listen to your questions and any feedback or comments that you have. So once we are done with the session with Professor, hopefully it's going to be around an hour and a half. And after that, as I said, we would like to take your questions. And if you have any comments, just put it down in the chat and we'll make sure to cover most of your questions. So thank you again for being with us today. And we would like also to thank Professor Mohammed Zairi for being with us. And yes, Professor, you can go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you, Shema. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everybody, from wherever you are in around the world. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you today and to make this journey together, whilst the focus is going to be on the UAE government excellence model, particularly with the latest thinking, the latest changes and enhancements. I would like to start with you on a journey of really challenging what excellence is all about, particularly with this global challenge that we all had to face, the coronavirus, and what resilience was demonstrated, what agile reaction was also put in place, what innovative thinking through human ingenuity was displayed, and what are the outcomes. And obviously, as you know, it's a mixed bag, and there are various reasons for that. But in order to really, for us to validate where we are today with the management thinking, I think we really have to say whether the disruption that took place for every enterprise around the world, for every government entity, was handled professionally, with readiness, with anticipation, or whether everybody had to react to a crisis. And I think this is important for us. We started to talk about the changes required for quality thinking and the way we evaluate world-class, the way we evaluate performance excellence a while back. And I put this slide deliberately. A lot of the things that have happened now, I think the thinking to prepare organizations for the future was already in place going back a few years. And one of the books that had an alarming title, it was about quality, deep in crisis, the uncertain future of the quality profession. Not to say that we don't have the thinking. I think it's very much because we have been lax in sticking to knitting without really innovating. And the consequences is that the old tools, the old thinking, the old infrastructure, the conventional capabilities, in many ways around the world were not sufficient to alleviate the fears of handling coronavirus and to get organizations to respond with agility, to demonstrate the resilience, and really to counter the challenges that now we are facing. So in a sense, the thinking may be sound, but why don't we make the thinking happen? And I think that through this journey, we will be asking a lot of questions. I think at the basic level, we really need to ask the question about the meaning of excellence. Is it clearly defined? And can we guarantee that it will nurture and develop organizations so that they can reach their ultimate objective, their vision, ambitious vision, and so on? And if it doesn't, then we can't continue to use something that is suboptimized, something that doesn't serve the purpose. So it has to be fit for the purpose. The second question is, and I think this has been posed many, many years ago, and we are still posing the same question. Are there any guarantees that if we apply excellence to the best way, in the best way possible, this will deliver results, this will generate the impact that we desire to achieve? And the other question is, if we are to learn from stellar organizations and role model organizations, do we just focus on those that have won prestigious awards? Are they the most successful examples to learn from and to be inspired from? Or can learning take place from a wide variety of contexts and organizations? So does winning a prestigious award qualify an organization to be considered as world-class? And it's an interesting question to ask. And is excellence the privilege of the very few who have resources, who are large, who are working in particular industry sectors, or can any organization become excellence? That is an important question. And as we are today, it is valid to ask the question as to whether we can continue to use the principles of excellence that have been around for a long time now, or is there something different, something new? And I think that the presentation of today will answer this question, hopefully adequately. And at the core of this presentation is to challenge the notion as to whether excellence can be subjected to change, or do we just continue being dogmatic and by being resistant and consider it to be cast in tablet of stone? The same question was asked about quality. It doesn't mean that we negate the quality as we have grown to accept it, implement it, and cherish it, and committed to preserving it. But I think that as the eras change, as the disruptions become real, it is legitimate to ask the question as to whether what we did before remains relevant, remains suitable, and has the power basically to help an organization compete in a turbulent market and deal with frequent change and having to absorb the digital revolution and having to cope basically with the pace of change. So this has not happened before, unfortunately. If we go back 100 years ago, 50 years ago, I think the pace of change was extremely slow. The markets were predictable. Organizations were really looking at short-term, small leaps and managing with full control, with full confidence. That is no longer the case. And we need, therefore, to validate as to whether something different must happen. So let's try to answer this question by listening to the source. In other words, let's go back to where the word excellence has started, where it came from, and what the Godfathers are saying about its relevance in today's era. These are the two gentlemen who coined the word excellence in the early 80s, Tom Peters and Robert Waterman, when they published their seminal book, In Search of Excellence, based on the work they have done with 43 organizations in the USA, using a sound methodology and coming out with a methodology or a series of dimensions that they found were the critical factors that led to those 43 organizations' success. This is what they looked like at that time, and this is what they look like today. So we are really looking at the work that these two giants have done 40 years ago. The methodology they used, because they both worked for McKinsey as consultants, was the 7S's model, which was really, and still is valid today, as a complete holistic model that can look at organizations as ecosystems. Here we are today using the word ecosystem, but very much the thinking was available at that time. So using the McKinsey model to really find out what is good about these 43 organizations and where are the deficiencies and where are the wow factors, Peters and Waterman came up with these 8 attributes that they claimed are the ones that drive management excellence. And the wording may be different today, but very much every single one of those 8 attributes, I believe, are still valid today. A bias for action is maybe agility, maybe responsiveness, maybe disruption, maybe transformation in order to accelerate the pace and achieve at the top level. Being close to the customer is valid today. Autonomy and entrepreneurship is really about employee engagement, very powerful today. And productivity through people is really using human capital as the asset. Hands-on, value-driven is customer centricity, is value creation, is really positioning the organization through its distinctive portfolio of offerings. Stick to the knitting is that distinctive competitive advantage by focusing really on what matters and what an organization's might excel at. And simple form lean staff is having the quality foundation is to be efficient, to be effective before you can be competitive. And at the heart of this ecosystem is to have this responsiveness, adaptability, simultaneous loose-tight properties in order to cope with the rigors of the external market and adapt and become resilient, but also be preemptive in capturing basically opportunities that might exist. So you can see that 40 years onward, these attributes are still valid. We use different words, we use different jargon. Maybe we've added a few more things, but nonetheless, the integrity of that work still continues. What is interesting in this introduction is not to revisit the work that Peters and Waterman have done, but it's really to look at their own evaluation, particularly an interview which took place with Tom Peters 20 years ago. So what I'm going to share with you is an evaluation from one of the 2 godfathers of excellence, what he said 20 years ago. And I think it's valid and it's important because he said that unfortunately organizations over the years have taken what we have recommended, what we have come up with as the only best way. And if we apply it, therefore, we're going to become excellent. And before that, obviously, the 2 gurus have criticized scientific management because it's really about building blocks. So you do things, the right things in the right way, and you can expect the right results. And they said we never recommended and we never said that this is the best way. There is no other way. And the other comment, which is interesting in this, is that people had the belief that these 8 attributes, dimensions, fundamentals of excellence, they are predictive in their power to deliver excellence. So on the one hand, they are the only options for organization. And on the other, if we apply them, we can predict what's going to happen to us. And again, the claim is that, according to Tom Peters, is that they never said that. They never said that we can guarantee results. We can guarantee basically survivability and sustainability of an organization. The third comment, and I think this is a very interesting one, is to take excellence, holistically speaking, and to consider it as permanent, as the word there says, perpetuity. And again, this is denied by Tom Peters, who says, you know, nothing is permanent, nothing can be used for perpetuity, and excellence, and this is my word, is a relative concept. It has to be validated, it has to be vetted, and it has to be challenged. It has to fit the purpose, and the purpose really evolves and might change with time. Another comment which is interesting is that the word excellence means that you don't achieve forever. And there was a belief that once you become excellent, you'll be revered forever. Today, tomorrow, and forever, as he says here. And he denied that completely by saying that the interest is never in becoming excellence. The real interest is, what are you doing today? How are you learning today? And as long as an organization continues to pioneer, to innovate, to elevate, to impact, to transform, and to disrupt, then most likely it will be worthy of achieving time and time again the pinnacle of success. We have seen it through our own research over the years that if you reach a peak and then you become stale and you allow inertia to set in, then the only way next is downhill. And it has happened to many organizations, unfortunately, because the belief about excellence was that it is a title that will qualify any organization to be hailed excellent time and time again. And the other thing that is mentioned is that these 8 principles, and remember, Tom Peters were talking in 2001. Now I am trying to reevaluate his answers after another 20 years. So 40 years from the development of these 8 attributes. And he's saying, well, there is only one choice. The choice is that leaders can adopt these 8 attributes of excellence with the notion that there is no guarantee for them to be successful. There is no predictability about what the outcomes might be, because there are other factors, and obviously that's why the leadership of excellence is a real challenge. But also he says that if, on the other hand, you are searching for a quick win, you're searching for a magic wand, and then you say, well, if you cannot guarantee me success, then forget it, we're not going to implement. Then if you ignore these 8 principles, you will definitely fail. So it's really, as Deming used to say, survival is not compulsory. To survive, you have to do the best, the optimum. And if you don't do it, then most likely you will fail. So I think that's a very stark comment at the time. And looking at what these 8 attributes have done over 20 years, and now obviously 40 years, this one legitimizes the work that has been done in the UAE, because the arguments that we have been having as professionals over the years were about whether the credibility, the viability, the suitability, the relevance of the components of excellence get carried forward without having to challenge them. You know, so in other words, they are usable, they are suitable, and there is no need to challenge them, or whether we can actually stop and say, you know, do they fit the real purpose, the new purpose? We live in an era, as he says here, we work faster, we work with disruption, and there is constant change, there is uncertainty and volatility, and organizations' longevity has shrunk significantly. So there is no guarantee of survival unless you compete through change. So if that is the case, as he's saying here, then excellence itself must be challenged. And its relevance must be evaluated on the basis of its contribution. So if it is based on all thinking that serves the purpose at a particular point in time, then we have to say, does it serve the purpose in this era of digital disruption, where transformational thinking is reshaping organizations on an everyday basis, and where everything is crazy, everything is fast, everything is surrounded with uncertainty, and where organizations now work more as open systems, we're in complex systems of different levels of connectivity. So I think it's important here, and I'm glad that even the Godfathers 20 years ago have mentioned implicitly that excellence can be subjected to evaluation and to change and additions. So this takes us to the core of the presentation today. The UAE government is one of the few governments around the world that has pioneered through excellence by introducing excellence across government holistically, not in discrete areas, but excellence was introduced as a matter of choice, not as an imposition because of crises or to effect drastic change. It was introduced through a belief system, and this journey goes back just over 25 years now. So that is a point to bear in mind. The second thing is that whilst the necessity to consider excellence, which was based at the time on international models, the blend of the Baldrige model, the European excellence model, nonetheless, the validation was really when a vision is to be launched, which is based on ambitious aims and objectives, which is disruptive and which really seeks to elevate the whole country to position itself as one of the top 10 countries in the world. So when you have this high level of ambition, when you have really strategies that are stretching, that are driven by innovation, by new thinking, where there is so much disruption in terms of defining the role of government, the question gets asked as to whether excellence holistically, as a philosophy, as a set of principles, as tools and methodologies, can help a government that drives its vision through ambition. This is where the validation took place. And I think in 2016, the UAE government remodeled the meaning of excellence to suit its real purpose, and that is to serve the needs of government in the present and in the future, to focus on the core aspects of government, and to really validate whether the new thinking that was put in place has delivered the right impact, has led to the growth and development of government ministries, and to measure the final outcomes. And I think that the outcomes were extremely positive, have demonstrated that excellence can be challenged. We can add, we can reconfigure, we can blend, we can create specific recipes of success, and we can achieve. And once the acceptance of excellence as a relative concept takes place, I think everything else becomes possible. So let me just say to you that from the experience of the UAE government, these are some of the most critical considerations that took place. One was to really evaluate the power of excellence as a driver of government ambitions, and to maintain the relevance by correlating what excellence gives and what it does in relation to achieving big leaps in performance and achieving higher standards of delivery, of government delivery. The second thing was that excellence defined in the context of the UAE government is really about preserving the present that is relevant, is about delivering the most critical aspects that the government is focusing on. And thirdly, and importantly, excellence should pave the way for the future. So the future became a critical component. So future readiness is something that has been added. The other thing is that in terms of the impact of excellence, it's not just sufficient today to measure efficiency, effectiveness, and the consistency of delivering services to citizens, to customers, and so on. But it's very much about the overall outcomes that impact on enhancing the quality of life. And that has been a new addition, measuring the overall contribution of excellence in enhancing the quality of life. And the redefinition of government in the wider context of fit for the purpose has also started to take place. So it's no longer sufficient for government ministries to engage the same capabilities that they have, to work with the same structures and value chain that they have, and to commit to delivering a higher level of ambitions and visions that are really stretching. One of the aspects that was added is to challenge the business model, the very purpose of each government entity, and whether it has what it takes to deliver ambition for the future. And this leads automatically to introducing these dynamic capabilities such as agility, such as adaptability, such as disruption, in order to create fitness for the purpose and maintaining the health of a government entity in order to move forward. This is radical, but it has been essential. And the word strategic planning has been broadened, open-ended, in an open-ended way, to reflect direction and not to really pin down the commitments and allocate the resources on a 3 to 5 year plan. And this is a big learning lesson. In an uncertain age where there is disruption all the time, where digital transformation is changing things every day, it is important to operate with flexibility, with agility. And it is important not to consume all the resources or not to pin down basically the focus of an organization. And as things change, it becomes difficult to adapt. So strategic direction can encompass loads of key priorities, loads of strategies, lots of policies, lots of requirements, but also it has enough space to accommodate new urgent thinking. And I think the COVID-19 experience has really validated this particular point. I think the other aspect was the notion of measuring, that tracking over time what the KPI does in terms of nudging, improving, meeting targets is no longer sufficient in this digital era. And the focus now is not to track the KPI, but to track the value and the ultimate outcome. And you use those KPIs that matter most. So the measurement should be very selective, very focused, and reflecting really what must be measured. And another aspect was this notion of value creation by blending what the government entities do in terms of service, design, development, and delivery, but by operating in this context as open ecosystems, allowing the consumer, the citizen, the customer to be engaged by focusing on mapping journeys and providing experiences that impact emotionally and deliver happiness, and also doing so by using the concept of SMART, so that the impact is to make it easy, to make it convenient, to make it personalized, to allow people to customize, and work with the huge challenge of using SMART so that the seamless services, the integrated services that are bundled between government entities will provide even higher levels of value and quality, and make it easy through the one-stop shop kind of perspective. And the digital enablement is not just automation, it's very much to put data at the heart of the decision making, to use data everywhere, to invest in the power of analytics in order to create better insight, better understanding, and nourish the ecosystem with these data flow and these interactions, interplays that will allow top management to see what's going on in a very unique and significant manner. And leveraging through collaboration as a G2G, government to government entities, as I said, through the one-stop shop, but also leveraging by working closely with the private sector. And this, for the first time in history, is allowed because, number one, government entities are designed to operate as open ecosystems. Number two, the huge investment in digital infrastructure allows connectivity to take place. And number three is really the vision of government to encourage leveraging and to stop the old-fashioned traditional way of working by having everything under the same roof. And most of the governments that suffer from high levels of inefficiency are those governments that have entities that are still traditional, and they don't focus on leveraging from outside. And the government entities' behavior as an ecosystem means that the enterprise thinking is injected in every single government entity all the time, revisiting the value creation capability, looking at distinctiveness, measuring up against tough standards around the world, focusing significantly on innovation and shaping the future through ambition. And that really puts in place a model of excellence that is different from having building blocks and basically working with the predictable outcomes in mind, and that doesn't take place anymore. So the other thing that we have learned from the reflections of Tom Peters, and something that has been done in the UAE government, is to create this elusive pursuit of a competitive position. and is not to chase numbers. I think, and I'm sure most of you will agree with me, that over the years we have been distracted by looking at numbers, scores of, if you like, excellence assessment. So for example, an organization that wants to win an award will assess itself, and then it would put a target by improving its score by 200 points or 250 points, or whatever, because it believes that that is the pinnacle of success. This is a major distraction, because on the one hand, you cannot really put KPIs and chase what the KPIs are doing in terms of numbers without really focusing on the value of the work that you do. Secondly, excellence, first and foremost, is about building capabilities, because capabilities deliver the value and deliver the outcomes. And if we omit the most important aspects of excellence, which is to build capabilities, to build maturity in capabilities, to build distinctiveness in the core aspects of the organization, then we can forget about being excellent. So I think that having an elusive pursuit of a competitive position is a reminder to leaders that what they should track is the maturity of excellence, the robustness, the agility, the distinctiveness of their core capabilities, and continuously invest in growth and development so that the organization is resilient, is adaptable, is agile, is innovative, and has the power to create value for its stakeholders. And then measurement will take care of the rest. So I'm not going to say much about this slide, but it's an important one. There are 10 rules about using performance excellence in the right way and not being too absorbed with numbers. Most organizations have a hidden cost, which is an overusage of KPIs and that are meaningless and generating a lot of data, which is costly, that the organization does not really need. And a lot of the measurement is not useful because it measures after the effect. It measures retrospectively, and it doesn't really help in planning the future. And the cycles of generating the data and working on its integrity and analysis and producing the reports takes a long time. So really, through these 10 rules, we're saying that rationalization is focus on what really matters. Relevancy is that we use measurement as a relative concept. If an organization is changing all the time, if it is reconfiguring and transforming and disrupting its business as usual, then we cannot really carry forward the way we measure and continue to measure if the context has changed. It's silly, it doesn't make sense. So we should always make the relevance of the methods that we use for measurement an important focus. Novelty is using the SMART principles for capturing what is intended. We need to control what the KPIs do. We need to really legitimize and justify the means that we use to really look at what outcomes are being generated and innovatively, so with novelty in mind. If we work in the context of an ecosystem, then surely we have to have a structure where measurement that pervades throughout the ecosystem has a structure, has a hierarchy, and we classify the measures in the right way so that we can see what's going on throughout the ecosystem. And the strategy of measurement gets omitted. We rush with KPI design, KPI implementation, but we don't really start upstream by looking at the planning of measurement, the cycle of measurement, the frequency of measurement, the smart methods of measurement, the digitization aspects of measurement before executing. That is an important point. And the effectiveness is not the effectiveness in terms of results. I'm talking here about the effectiveness of the measurement itself. If it doesn't deliver what we want, if it's not measuring what really matters, then action has to be taken. And the new emerging type of measurement is really the measurement that gives us insight. It's not really about tracking targets. It's not linear. It's dynamic, but it's important because it sheds light on blurred aspects of the organization. And the more we know, the more we see, the better is the decision making, the better is planning. And this leads to the word confidence, which is to rely on the power of analytics. Historical measurement, after the effect measurement, is not very useful today. What we need to measure is really what is to come, the insight aspects, by understanding why certain things take place and what to do about them, and then measure into the future. Measurement has to show its power by being able to guide momentum acceleration. So we need to find where the potential is and do the stretching, do the nudging, and do the acceleration so that we make the big leaps in performance. And the last point is sustainability of measurement in order to preserve the ecosystem itself. So holistically, all these dials measure the health of the ecosystem. So that is one aspect that we have worked significantly on. And in terms of the impact generated, this is where new thinking is added from the point of view of measurement. And if measurement gets to be controlled centrally, and you can imagine at a level of a whole government, then that is not very healthy. So the delegation of measurement to a certain type of measurement is significant to allow each ministry, each entity to take ownership of its destiny and to own excellence. So the measurement of control, of quality, the measurement of compliance, of systems, processes, procedures, and policies, and so on, is really to be embedded in every single government organization, and the control needs to be handed over to them so that they can create that foundation. Because without the foundation, we cannot really start to contemplate what we can do with excellence, how far we can go, and what will be the transformational possibilities that can be explored. So excellence with the new thinking, with the new mindset, is more about development, is more about enrichment, is the role of government to be the catalyst, to bring in the power of innovation, to inspire with the new thinking, to basically introduce digital technology in every single aspect, to redefine services by making them experience-oriented, for example, to create these open systems, to create connectivity, to establish collaboration and close partnership between various government entities and the private sector. And if, in the context of the UAE, for example, that is the case, there is ambition of a different kind, then there is something called contriver, creating own recipe. This is not a high-risk undertaking, because remember, as the pyramid demonstrates, you have a quality foundation. So you build the base right, you foolproof, you ensure that quality is not compromised. You use sound systems, policies, procedures, and so on, in order to be reliable, consistent, dependable from what you offer. And then you work with enrichment, with best practice, with renewal of thinking. because as everybody knows, knowledge is a commodity product. So unless you renew what used to work well, will become gradually weight that will slow down the organization and the burden for it to be agile, to be fast, to be responsive. So the offloading of knowledge that is old and that is not relevant anymore and replenishing it with new thinking is really critical for modern government. So as you move forward with digital technology, you don't want to be distracted by using it in the wrong way. Digital technology to automate legacy systems that need overhauling. But why not use digital technology to basically enrich smart thinking in making services of future generations, things that have not been offered before, where value is at a higher level and where we can start to personalize, mesmerize, and impact on happiness. So this is really what can be done. And I go back to really the distraction that has taken place for a long time, because we are chasing key performance indicators and looking at data without really looking at whether we are developing, transforming, and innovating in the right way. So I think with the new changes in the government excellence model, we are really introducing a different philosophy of measurement. We are focusing on a capability of measurement that is more holistic because it's fit for the purpose. It's really about making the whole ecosystem work and work well. I think it's important to have a strategy of measurement, and you can see the levels here. There is the baseline, there is the present, the insight, and there is the future foresight that needs to be measured as well. And different levels, different purposes, different expectations, and the core of it is the catalyst thing, because value creation is not really the same old thing. It's not what's one size fits all. Government services today are offered through customization, personalization, convenience, basically, and clustering the population according to the generations. Millennial generation differs from the requirements of Generation Z or the older generation, basically. So this is very, very critical to make sure that we look at value creation in a different way. And we must not forget that ultimately, as far as government is concerned, the measurement is the measurement of growth and development. If governments don't solidify their abilities through the capabilities that matter, and if they don't develop the thinking to make sure it's relevant to the 21st century, then they would struggle basically to meet the requirements of individuals and communities as well. In a sense, as a small summary here, we must accept today that the journey of excellence is really about disruptions at different levels. An organization that wants to look at this elusive pursuit of excellence must understand that it's not about chasing numbers. It's not linear. And in the context of today's environment, you have to have what it takes to climb to bigger heights. The baseline, which used to be the pinnacle before, is really to have a quality foundation. If you don't have quality, if you don't have the license to practice, you cannot really aspire to become excellent. You cannot buy basically your place in the elite organizations around the world if you don't invest heavily in creating the right culture, the right focus on improvement, the right discipline for delivering something suitable to meet according to expectations, to meet efficiently, and so on. So these are the different heights, the different levels. They are big steps in the journey of excellence, and they must be adhered to. So whether it's consistency and reliability and dependability, whether what used to be the pinnacle, and there are many, many organizations and governments around the world who still limit themselves to measuring efficiency and measuring volume, or measuring output, or measuring effectiveness. But there are many other steps beyond that. That is not sufficient, particularly if you have an ambitious vision. You want to be amongst the top governments in the world. So if you want to do that, it's bigger heights. So you need to have what it takes. You need to work on your core and critical capabilities. You need to revamp. You need to redefine the functions. You need to transform. You need to offload. You need to outsource. You need to leverage what you don't have. And another big leap forward is to not use volume as the way to measure the performance of government, but use the V for value. So value creation through innovation must be the ultimate focus, and must be really geared towards personalization and customization. And then measuring at the bigger heights is measuring amongst the top. Bear in mind the target is moving all the time, so you are chasing these elusive targets. And if a country, a government wishes to go to even bigger heights, then you really have to use disruptive thinking and take the pain, but reap the benefits of trying to achieve at the highest level possible. So I think this is really what modern excellence is about. It is not linear, it's not predictable. It's not about achieving pinnacles. There are no pinnacles of success. It's all moving targets. As we think we have reached the summit, the highest height, then we see that there is another height waiting in front of us. And that elusive pursuit of excellence becomes accepted, because those organizations, they have what it takes. They have the momentum, they have the innovability, they have the dynamism required, they have the agility, and they accept the challenge. And this brings me to what does it look like, this government excellence model. We call it now the Excellence Model 2.0. It was launched in 2018, and we were supposed to test it for the first time in 2020, and then came the coronavirus pandemic. But now the government is preparing a wholesale assessment exercise for the whole government in the forthcoming period. I will describe the components, but as you can see, it's depicted as an ecosystem. There are 3 pillars, and there is a nucleus that I will focus on. There is different weights, but the biggest weight is really on the core activities of government. 75% is on core and 25% is on enablers. Let's really do a whistle tour. But before that, if you can just consider with me this slide for a few minutes. It's really describing, if you like, the dynamic behavior of the ecosystem, and validating what I said earlier on, that the UAE government excellence philosophy is first and foremost one of development, and secondly, one for evaluating outcomes and looking at performance. So in terms of the left-hand side, every single government entity has to start by being customer-centric. Its mindset is really about value creation, it's about impacting on quality of life, and it's about serving individuals, citizens, communities, customers, and so on. And it's focused on development in terms of building the right capabilities at a distinctive level in order to create value. And this process starts with being purpose-driven. So if the purpose is defined right, and if the organization has got what it takes in terms of starting with agile strategic directions and driving the strategy by engaging the core and critical capabilities, and by focusing on those activities that particularly can be engaged to create value, and constantly by transforming the enterprise through enablement, through digital enablement. And then that cycle continues basically to work so that the organization is well equipped to create value at the right level. It's has what it takes to be innovative, and it can constantly build the distinctiveness in terms of the core capabilities. On the other side is really the measurement. The measurement is tracking value. It's not tracking what a KPI does. It's value-driven impact. And it's also about delivering the sustainable performance outcomes, the ultimate outcomes, which are enhancement in the quality of life. And the process is very similar, is measuring what matters, is measuring with novelty, is looking at value-based measurement and tracking value creation, and the closed loop is to give that capability of measurement and making sure that what we said earlier on about being customer-centric is converted into being value-driven as well. So the two go hand in hand. And what we said about distinctiveness in capabilities through growth and development is really about generating high levels of impact to support the ambitious vision of the government, but also it's about ultimately impacting on making quality of life better. The ecosystem has 5 building blocks, more or less. We have a philosophy, or what we call fundamentals. We have 3 pillars. We have 11 criteria. And we use something new called principles. I will explain that a little bit in more detail in a minute. And of course, as you have seen in the model I shared with you, we have the nucleus, which we refer to now as the catalysts. So let's start with the first pillar, which is vision realization. That is got the most significant weight. It has 4 criteria to focus on: enhancing well-being and the quality of life, future readiness, strategic direction, and competitiveness, and lastly, main functions in the way I described earlier on. You can see that vision realization, insofar as the criteria are concerned, is not necessarily about activities and initiatives. It's very much that these 4 areas are in themselves sub-ecosystems. They are about developing the right policies and developing holistic systems and enablement for government entities to apply, developing sets of strategies and objectives, developing the tools and the guidelines to implement and impact, and developing the measurement that will track maturity in those 4 areas. That takes time. For example, the future readiness probably took a little bit more than 4 years to mature as a thinking, as a philosophy, and now it's a sub-ecosystem by itself implemented within the government. Similarly, the well-being and happiness with a focus on enhancing the quality of life is also a sub-ecosystem that is very comprehensive, and it takes time to develop that. So what the assessment does, it looks at maturity of the thinking in terms of building the right capabilities and engaging them in the right way, and constantly learning and innovating and disrupting the thinking in order to remain relevant. And on the other side is measuring the impact of that thinking in those criteria by looking at measuring what matters and impacting at 3 levels. I will describe these 3 levels in more detail later on. So that is one element, one pillar, most important pillar. It serves the purpose, because if you recall, and I'm sure you do, if you look at other models of excellence, except perhaps EFQM has just changed slightly its focus, and they are using similar language to vision realization in the model. But prior to that, the building blocks, the 9 building blocks or the 7 building blocks of Baldrige, they are very similar. They are basically predictable: leadership, policy and strategy, people, resources, processes, and so on and so forth. This is different. The government uses excellence to drive an ambitious vision. 2021, the UAE government will celebrate the Golden Jubilee and the finalization of a major journey, which is Vision 2021. But this model, this very model that you see today, GEM 2.0, is to equip the government to continue the pace and accelerate in order to pursue Vision 2071. So the government now is focusing, the shift is to focus on the centennial. The centennial, 2071, the UAE would have been 100 years old as a federation. And that is really what we mean about relevant excellence. Does it fit the purpose? Does it feed ambitious visions? And believe me, after 26, 27 years of using excellence, surely if there wasn't enough conviction to depend on excellence, to use excellence to an optimum level, to shape the future of excellence, the UAE government could have taken a different course. But the fact that after 26 years, it is still sticking with excellence. However, it's excellence that is relative, that is redefined, and that serves a new purpose. I think this is very, very important for us to appreciate. Let me now go to the second pillar. Whilst vision realization is about what it takes to achieve in terms of vision, in terms of steering, directing, in terms of the design, the configuration, and in terms of ultimately the impact that we seek to achieve. The second pillar is very much about the value creation. So distinctive value is 35%. So between vision realization and distinctive value is 75%. That is really core. This is important because it is about stretching as well. And it is not about volume, it's about value, but also it's about innovation. So 15% is about smart services, services that are of future generation, that are smart, that are connected, that are seamless, and that impact significantly on the emotional aspect and the happiness aspect of people. Using a blend of service innovativeness, using smart using co-creation and proactive engagement of the end beneficiary, but by the same time, using concepts of experience and measurement, which is much deeper, more relevant, not measuring functionality and measuring expectations, but measuring the emotional aspect and the physiological aspect, the psychological aspect, and the overall aspect, which is an outcome of the quality of life. And this can only happen if there is an investment in investing in digital, not just to automate, but to really create the smartness of design, the smartness of development, and the smartness in delivery to secure governance, to secure proactive engagement, and to allow the government to work basically as an open ecosystem. This is key. And the third thing, of course, is that whilst technology is a big enabler, let's not forget that in the end, humans serve humans. So the talented professionals who work across the full cycle, basically, of interfacing with citizens and customers, providing them with unique and memorable experiences, providing them with intelligent and innovative solutions, and working with them with empathy in mind. That's what makes a difference. So we need to make sure we have those people who are conversant with technology, who master basically the concept of smartness in all of its aspects, but who know how to serve people, how to take care of people, and how to be empathetic. So this is another leap forward, and it is already making a difference. Insofar as the enablers are concerned, the reason why the weight is still relatively high is because, again, if we compare this aspect of the government excellence model with existing models around the world, we have scaled up basically the enablement through the conventional management of resources and assets, the brick and mortar and IT technology infrastructure perspective, and just being obsessed with the financial resources as well. So that's only 5% of the resources, because government of the future, and bear in mind that the future is one of the 4 criteria of vision realization, and it is significant. We have to really work differently. The intangible aspects of enablement are critical. Being data-driven and having knowledge management as a capability, creating a knowledge reservoir that the organization can establish a competitive advantage with, is significant. So the intangible is gradually becoming more important, and learning how to manage knowledge as a commodity product, learning how to leverage, and learning to engage basically that know-how that an organization has is important in the future. The third aspect, and it has the highest weight in this pillar, is partnerships and integration. This is sending a huge message to all the government entities by saying that the government of the future is operating as an ecosystem, and one-stop shop is really what is desired, and then government to government relationships are going to be important. Planning not just through the experience, mapping the journey of the customer from an experience point of view. That has boundaries, that has limitations, and each government entity surely will focus on that. What we're trying to send as a message to everyone is that beyond the boundaries, the journey of people continues in their lives. So moving from experience mapping to human journey mapping. So life continues. So by answering the needs of customers or citizens in specific area does not answer the other questions. And by creating this seamlessness, these collaborations and these partnerships between government entities and government and business will ensure that we are really being human-centric in serving, in designing, in developing. And the more we extend this as the human life cycle perspective, the better we are going to be in the future. And one thing that was added, and it is not trivial, it's very significant, is government communication. I think communication is not really appreciated for its power all over the world. Communication internally is critical because it creates commitment. Transparency creates basically ease of mind and creates a happy work environment. And the more people feel that they know everything about their organizations and the intention of leaders for the future and so on and so forth, the more likely they will commit, and the more likely they'll be proud, the more likely they will be highly motivated. That's one aspect. But also there is the external perspective. And communication tends to be used in traditional government to react to crisis, to basically explain and to remedy basically the critical situations that exist, to handle the media and the news. That is not the most significant component. The most significant component is that with an ecosystem perspective, with a government that is committed to be excellent in governance, to be transparent, communication has to be a critical strategic tool because it creates trust. It creates close bonding between the government and its citizens and communities. It also educates society about what an entity is planning to do, what it has launched, what it has achieved. And it's a tool for branding, for creating respect and appreciation, most importantly for building trust. And it's also about the international recognition, and that is important. So the power of excellence in the modern day is operating with confidence, being transparent, having governance as one core aspect of being excellent. And it's about using communication to reflect that, to build trust, and to build the appreciation and basically the acknowledgement from wider society and even from the global population as a whole. So in a sense, these three pillars collectively drive excellence in government. But let me now take you to the nucleus, which is really disruptive thinking and the new transformation insofar as excellence is concerned. I will first share with you the assessment tool for the three pillars very quickly, and then I will talk about the catalyst effect. The assessment tool looks at the government entity as an integrated ecosystem. As you can see, the three pillars interfacing together, and then at the core, there is the catalyst, innovation, agility, and preemption. And then you can see the small circles basically reflecting the 11 criteria that make up the model. And we no longer look at excellence as a series of building blocks that raise, if you like, a false expectation about what excellence is and what to expect out of implementing those building blocks. It's no longer that. It's really about every entity, what it wishes to do for itself, how it creates its own ecosystem, how it defines its own level of ambitions. and how it preserves its health by having at the core these great abilities of innovation, of agility and preemption. It's not a race between government entities. It's very much about creating a momentum that can serve the real purpose, which is to facilitate the realization of an ambitious vision, but also to give every entity the opportunity to shine, the opportunity to position itself, and the opportunity to create pride for itself by being unique and by having its own distinctiveness and by defining its own DNA. So the assessment of capabilities, as I said before, a major radical change in evaluation. And this is a correction of a mindset that has existed for a long time. Capabilities are not things that you do and things that you accumulate so that you, under the same roof, you think that just in case things are required, they will be available. It's no longer the case. I think capabilities are there to be designed and their relevance evaluated all the time. So that the maturity is really about designing by developing across the board, and particularly the most critical capabilities, and to make sure that we offload those that have least relevance and to reinforce the capabilities that are core, that are required. And also it's about designing the new capabilities. An organization that is excellent, or to be more precise, an organization that is in the pursuit of elusiveness in terms of excellence, is one that doesn't depend on what exists, in one that stretches itself by adding new capabilities that we refer to as dynamic capabilities. One of the aspects is agility and preemption, new fields, new ways of thinking, and in the future, there will be focus on those dynamic capabilities. Capabilities are not there to be stored. They're not there of being in an inventory. They are there to be deployed. Many organizations have legacies, and they have a large number of capabilities that are not being used. And so today, we need to measure the deployment of capability as a process and how they're implemented, and the effectiveness of the implementation, and all the way to building the maturity of the capabilities that we are deploying so that they become distinctive. Why should organizations continue to work with volume by having maybe hundreds of capabilities, and none of those are distinctive? And many organizations, they deploy capabilities without knowing what are the core areas in which they must excel. So if an organization wants to be excellent, it cannot be average by the same time. It cannot do what everybody else does. It cannot really cut and paste the know-how that exists elsewhere. To be distinctive means that an organization has to know the most significantly important capabilities and put strategies to deliberately build maturity and excellence in those capabilities. That is non-negotiable. And then, of course, capabilities are not on tablets of stone. They must be nurtured. The learning and development continues. We offload old knowledge, we bring in fresh knowledge to be relevant, but also we transform the thinking so that the uniqueness is not lost. So if we achieve distinctiveness, we don't want to lose it because it's a competitive advantage. It makes us unique. And lastly is about disruptive. A lot of the dynamic capabilities create new business models that government entities are learning how to create by being disruptive, by having leadership basically believing in disruption. And that is paving the way really towards the government of the future. So that is fundamentally new I would say, around the world as a way of looking at new forms of excellence in government. Insofar as the assessment of results are concerned, again, as I was trying to explain before, we no longer track the KPI. We really look at what is relevant, what is timely, and what is robust and reliable in terms of the measurement, and the insight that we gain from that measurement, and all the way to basically using measurement not from a linear perspective, not from tracking basically target, meeting targets and so on, but rather to create powerful insight. And in this way, we will create throughout the ecosystem 3 tiers, 3 levels of possible excellence. One is the baseline, which used to be the pinnacle with the old definition of excellence, and that is performance excellence. An organization, a government entity that is highly effective and efficient and has robustness in terms of its processes, and it delivers quality, it delivers consistently, it is dependable. And the results basically show that time and time again. And with innovation, it squeezes more and it delivers more efficiency. And in the end, this humongous effort, yes, we must recognize it as one level of excellence. And to shadow this, the more maturity in performance excellence exists, the more we can start to measure up against the toughest standards in the world. So competitiveness is saying, is our performance at an outstanding level? And then zoom in on the most critical areas by measuring beyond the results, measuring the outcomes, and looking at the impact from closing a competitive gap, becoming a benchmark ultimately. And that is another level of excellence, and it's worthy pursuing because it stretches the organization and it really starts to help the impact on the government's competitiveness and the government's desire to achieve its position as one of the top countries in the world. The third level is new, is very ambitious, is to measure the impact from the national well-being perspective, from the enhancements of the quality of life perspective, which will be ultimately the success story. Because it is nice to be competitive on the global arena, but it is nice to do so by correlating that, if you like, meritorious accolade by demonstrating that on the ground there are significant enhancements in the quality of life, in well-being, and each government entity is making its own contribution to that effect. And this is going to really redefine completely what excellence is all about and what particularly government excellence in the future is going to be. Let me now take you a little bit to the assessment of catalyst. That will be the last part of this webinar. I think from experience, evaluating the number of years where the government excellence model 1.0, the previous generation to that is concerned, we tried to really measure the impact of innovation in government. And I think the challenge was visible. First of all, there are different schools of thought insofar as what innovation in government means, how it is to be implemented, how its impact is to be measured. There are European schools of thought, there are basically Eastern Hemisphere and Eastern Asian perspectives on measurement. and there are other schools of thought. The idea is that for some school of thought, the measurement of innovation is really about system, putting a system in place, driving innovation. And the school of thought that believes strongly in ISO, for example, as one of the examples of one of the systems, is that this is the best way to drive innovation and to measure its impact. There's another school of thought where innovation is to be considered, defined at policy level, and integrated into strategy and driven through strategic goals and objectives and initiatives and measuring the outcomes. And there is a third school of thought, perhaps, which is very much about the soft aspects of the organization. Innovation is born out of a culture of excellence where creativity takes place, where teamwork takes place, where innovation gets born to tackle problems, but also to suggest ideas for the future and so on. And that's very much linked to culture and linked to people. So we said, okay, rather than be biased and look at one school of thought, I think it's important to really label innovation from a catalyst perspective as something that takes place everywhere. And remember, we're talking about an ecosystem. So you cannot really frame innovation under one of the three pillars and limit its power. So innovation is everywhere. The same thing with a new dynamic capability called agility. So there are colleagues who work at policy level. They see the significance of agility there. There are colleagues who are driving strategic thinking in government who see the merits of agility there. There are colleagues who implement excellence and quality, and they see the agility in transformation, in process, and so on. And there are colleagues who look at agility in culture, in the soft side. So we said, okay, rather than limit the power of agility, why not track it as agility in everything? So remember, we have innovation everywhere, agility in everything we do. And the third one is, if we are working with the context of an ecosystem that is connected, that is alert, that is dynamic, that is flexible, that is responsive, that is resilient, that is adaptable, then preemption becomes part of the motion of the dynamic ecosystem, or some people call it the living organism. So we said, okay, so to make sure that we are agile, to make sure we are innovating everywhere, we also need to be preemptive, react to avoid crisis, reconfigure because the opportunity is there, and make the decisions basically to accelerate, to steer in a different direction, whatever it is. So the cockpit that I'm putting leadership at the helm is really to create a new mindset of preemption. And we said, yeah, so the captains in an aircraft, they spend all the time of the flight, more or less, in the cockpit. So it's a preemption all the time because they make decisions every few seconds, every minute. And leaders must really basically feel the pulse and make the right decision all the time. So here we are, we created something called the plasma for the whole ecosystem by measuring innovation holistically everywhere, by looking at agility as a mindset, as a set of policies, as strategies, as processes, by saying agility in everything. So we measure it across the ecosystem. And then looking at preemption all the time. So based on this, we feel comfortable and confident that this is really reflecting the pace with which the government is going to drive this new vision 2071, but more importantly, the preparedness of government entities so that they can deal with disruption, self-inflicted disruptions or reaction to disruptive thinking from the top leadership of the government without any damage caused to the ecosystem itself. One thing to bear in mind, however, is that innovation is the most expensive currency in the catalyst effect, because it is what makes a difference in the value we create. It is what makes a difference in the distinctiveness of our capabilities. And it is what makes a distinctiveness in terms of achieving the competitive advantage. So preemption and agility are two powerful micronutrients that really help build innovative capability within this plasma. So there is an interplay between the three of them, but they're not equal, they're not at the same level, they don't mean the same thing. So ultimately, as you can see from the weights, and these weights have been adjusted even more. So the weight of innovation is 60, whilst the weight for agility and preemption is 20 for each. In the end, we want to have innovability as a characteristic for competitiveness and as the power house for reaching or attempting to reach this elusive target of excellence. So in terms of the assessment of the plasma, this is the preemption and the agility because they are new thinking. So the expectation is that government entities will have to go through the motion of learning, basically assimilating, implementing, and reaping out the harvest or achieving, impacting. So you can see that the weight is very much more on define and develop, because we want to allow government entities to really learn. Learning is important, and acquire what it takes, assimilate into the culture, and develop the critical capabilities for each of these new fundamentals of excellence. And you can see that as far as deployment and distinctiveness and impact, the expectation is that they will not be highly tangible, they will not be significant at this stage. Maybe the next cycle after this one, cycle 7 of the assessment, we will measure it with more maturity. The same thing with agility, because it's a new concept. The expectation is that government entities will go through the motion of defining and developing the thinking holistically and developing the capabilities. And then we will start to look at deploy and distinguish plus impact. So that's where they are. However, as far as the innovation is concerned, because remember, we have assessed government entities several times on innovation, and there have been a lot of energy, effort, and knowledge transfer and development that are taking place over the years. We are expecting higher levels of impact, and we're expecting higher levels of maturity in terms of capability or the deployment. And you can see that the weight in the assessment is higher towards measuring the impact and measuring the distinctive outcomes from innovation, which is an exciting period for reaping out the benefits, for looking at the harvest after 6 years or so of investing and creating a new mindset that focuses on innovation and embeds innovation in all aspects of organizational thinking. So just to conclude now, my last slide, the power of GEM 2.0 is really positioning a new form of excellence that can help any government to realize an ambitious vision. So it's about the present through insight, not through present through business as usual or preserving status quo. Is to preserve relevance, but also it's about the future. It's about shaping the future, creating that future readiness, and it's about achieving at the top level by doing what used to be impossible. We used to say that as far as the quality journey of the last 150 years or so, we spent maybe 2/3 of the time during that 150 years to focus on what I call quality in our life, whether it's products or services, whether it's a push perspective or a pull perspective, whether it's really treating the customer in a passive way or now engaging the customer. Nonetheless, the focus was on transactional relationships with customers and adding to quality in the life of people, but not touching life per se. And the shift now in more recent times is to focus on the quality of life. So if excellence is that powerful to help drive ambitious visions, that surely we must really try to measure the ultimate outcome, which is enhancements in the quality of life. And also it's about driving the future, not by sticking the label of uncertainty, but to drive the future with confidence about the analytics, the power of analytics, the ability to simulate the future, the ability to look at big data and predictability of what will happen. And there are even more powerful ways of looking at future readiness by looking at prescriptive scenarios and simulations about what the future will probably look like. And to really sum up what makes a magic wand in terms of implementing powerful excellence, bear in mind with a pinch of salt what Tom Peters has said in 2001, excellence has to be purpose driven. The purpose changes, the meaning of excellence changes. Excellence has to be subjected to tweaking, enhancing, transforming as knowledge changes. So it's adaptable philosophy. It's not really on a tablet of stone. Thirdly, excellence is not about numbers and achieving pinnacles, but rather it's about momentum acceleration and to boost performance of government entities and even the private sector to stretch and achieve more ambitious levels. The modern excellence is really about transformation and disruptive thinking. So it's constantly in search of a meaningful excellence that has that high level of novelty. And remember what Tom Peters said. He said, I don't care about an organization achieving excellence. What is important is that what an organization does on an everyday basis by experimenting, by generating new thinking, by playing with new ideas. That is what sustains an organization, is really to constantly keeping the ecosystem healthy and basically phasing out the old and allowing the new to basically replace it. And to use excellence as a catalyst, to plan the future, like the UAE government is doing, and to aspire to achieve at the top level, to guide superiority. And bear in mind that I indicated through the assessment toolkit that you can measure at 3 levels. The baseline level is tough. Performance excellence is used to be the pinnacle. Now it's the baseline. Any organization can achieve excellence, but it must really look at these levels. So performance excellence leads to competitive excellence, and then this leads to superior excellence, which is really looking at fundamental new thinking of assessing the quality of life itself. And it has to be stakeholder oriented all the time. So purpose driven and horizontally stakeholder oriented, and bear in mind that the stakeholders through this one-stop shop, through this connectivity and hyper-connectivity, other key players will come and go. Leveraging will determine who are stakeholders at any particular point in time. And that's the journey of an organization that seeks to become excellent. So I thank you for your attentiveness, and my apologies if I took a little bit too long.
Thank you, Professor. So we have some questions that has been raised by our attendees. So Munir said, how would you suggest to contextualize excellence to higher education, as His Excellency has also said it's possible excellence criteria as accreditations, benchmarking, rankings, employability, knowledge creation, and application. So maybe Prof can give us a brief.
If I understood the question, Shamma, with the second part, everything that has been said is powerful, useful, and essential. It's really about reinforcing the baseline. In today's environment, every organization must really propel itself through innovation. And I did say that the catalyst is really to nourish the ecosystem all the time by making sure that innovation is everywhere. And benchmarking is also about basically being inspired. It's about building that reservoir of knowledge. It's about learning from the best, and it's about remaining relevant. So it is the license to practice. It's not really luxury. It's a must do. Any organization that isolates itself from, if you like, the wider ecosystem of what it exists, the sector that it basically competes in, is an organization that will struggle eventually, because what it used to use with confidence to perform, to achieve, and to build its future gradually becomes redundant. And unless it has the ability to replenish that knowledge and to operate with agility, to reconfigure, to transform, and to adapt to the new mindsets and the new thinking, is going to struggle. And I think most organizations that struggle is because they have been isolated. They are closed systems. They're not aware of what is going on around them. So I think that's one aspect. The other aspect, I said that quality never gets lost. In terms of the higher education sector, accreditation was misused, just like what Tom Peters was saying earlier on. Many universities assume that by going through the rigors of being accredited using international standard, this will propel the institution to a high level of, if you like, prestige, but also will create the feel factor of, oh, we are excellent. That is wrong, because accreditation is means to an end. It's really about starting a journey where the institution can take advantage of the process itself, of the criteria that exist, of the maturity building that is required, and of preventing complacency by being subjected to regular audits and regular assessments. So it's always fresh, it's always working with that. That is really how accreditation should be used. But unfortunately, just like quality has been used 20 years ago, 25 years ago in the wrong way, and the ISO 9000 system, for example, we did a lot of research on this, has gained a bad name because many organizations started to buy it in order to show off, in order to say, oh, we're ISO certified. But the benefits inside the organization were zero. And that's a shame. So the system, it's not the system that is wrong. It is the mindset that is wrong. In higher education, the same problem exists. Many universities, they spend a lot of money to go through the rigors of getting international accreditation, whether it's the curriculums, whether it's the institution, whether it's basically the certain colleges or schools or whatever. But the question is, what are the benefits? What are the consequential benefits of going through that rigor, spending all that money in terms of development, in terms of changing the mindset, in terms of pursuing excellence? Not a lot, unfortunately. And I am not saying this to be negative. I am saying it because if we change the mindset and start to pursue excellence by having the foundation of international accreditation, solid standards. Remember what Tom Peters said. He said, you know what? These 8 attributes, it's at your peril. You use them, there is no guarantee you will be excellent. Right? He said that. You don't use them, you will be suffering. And I will say the same thing to our friend who asked the question. Accreditation is a must. If you use it, there is no guarantee that the institution will become excellent. It has to use it as a means to the end, to drive excellence. If you don't have accreditation today, you are really vulnerable. You really fall back because your students expect a certain quality standard. They expect basically to have the reassurance that you are measuring up against the best methods in the world. And that is how far we can stretch. We cannot extrapolate something and label it as an excellent system. It is not. Excellent is elusive. It means the hard work by having this solid foundation. And I hope that this helps.
Thank you, Prof. We have quite several questions also. Amish, he's from HCT, Abu Dhabi, Women College, I think. He has been your follower since '98, and it's his honor to be listening to you. His question is, in pursuit of excellence, are countries losing or compromising on value, ethics, integrity, and humanity? And are these dimensions obscured in KPIs?
Hi, Amish, and wishing you all the best as well. 98, that makes me feel old. I think it's a very good question. I think, I wish I had time to debate it with you a little bit longer. And I am not going to be overcritical. I think Tom Peters showed his frustration when he said that unfortunately, many organizations, and they sold over 3 million copies of In Search of Excellence. Everybody bought the book, everybody read the book, because everybody was saying, this is the magic wand, you just do what they said and implement these 8 attributes, and off you go, you will become excellent, you will achieve the top. And after 20 years, he said, we never said that, we never promised that. And he said, he resents, in fact, this thing called, we have achieved the top, we are at the pinnacle of success, because it kind of creates arrogance, it creates complacency, and it becomes an ego trip. And excellence, as you said, I think, is particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic, has made everybody humble. Because now we look at life and livelihood And unfortunately, excellence has been misused in order to create this competitive spirit, in order to create, if you like, this muscle power to shove everybody aside and create these prima donna, kind of perception about organizations that win these major trophies, major awards, and forgetting that the real virtues of excellence is really human, serving human. And I feel comfortable now, having been in the field for over 35 years, that this transition from the quality in our life to the quality of our life really clarifies what the pursuit of excellence means. Developing products that are mesmerizing, that are smart, have functionality, and least cost, to get the biggest market share, it has hurt humanity. There is no doubt about it. There is no excuse about it. Because it was really ruthlessness. Competitiveness means that, you remove everybody else and you basically scoop all the advantages. And the good news is, and the services as well, if you really serve a population of, let's say, 200 million people, and you let them down by designing one size fits all, a bunch of services that, regardless of the real needs, you offer them and say, take it or leave it. That is really showing a government that is complacent, that is insensitive, that doesn't focus on humans in order to improve the quality of life, but rather it's just superficially to say that, we are taking care of our society. It will become unacceptable because of what we are learning, at least from the COVID-19. There's more humanness. These concepts that I shared with you today, I am glad to say, they are being implemented in the UAE. The human-centric approach is the only way forward, because it makes excellence more, if you like, valid. If a government believes in that and says, I am not going to measure competitiveness as the pinnacle of our success by positioning the UAE in the top 10 countries in the world, we're going to do that, but by proving that we are enhancing the quality of life first. If you can't do that, how can you make the claim that excellence has boosted the positioning, basically, to international scene and made the country in the top 10? This is what wise leadership is about. This is what leadership that has huge empathy is about. And this is what the ultimate test of excellence is. It's not just one dimension, one aspect, one perspective. That kills the power of excellence. It's more about serving humanity. You can read all the philosophies of excellence, all the gurus, they cared about humanity, East and West. All the philosophies were totally compatible. It's about people, it's about respect, it's about improving life. Okay, for 150 years, we focused on the essentials, because the Maslow theory, most people around the world were still basically tackling the basics, the fundamentals of life, the basics. So that's why products and services, the demand was extremely high and the focus was on those. But in most countries now, the Maslow theory is more about other needs, the needs that matter in our life, the emotional, spiritual, psychological needs. And these will only be met if we redefine the meaning of excellence and really start to measure the quality of life per se.
Great, Professor. Junaid is asking, while setting up targets, what consideration could be taken in account, and what could be the measure to set up the target, and what are the indications that could help identifying the value driven from that target?
Okay, there are several questions in this question. So first of all, I think target setting at certain levels is not going to be useful anymore. I think it will continue to be useful and meaningful at the baseline level. Squeezing more efficiency, for example, by having ambitious targets in order to be smarter, leaner, that will continue to be relevant. Squeezing targets for optimizing the core activities, the value chain, that will continue to have relevance. And squeezing more out of targets for the output, the outcomes and so on. That is relevant. And the way to set the target is not by having a nominal figure or basically just a number out of a hat. What targets, if you like, the biggest criticism is that targets tend to be too soft, irrational, and they're too modest. And this obsession with nudging and Kaizen and continuous improvement and measuring up is a distraction now. Transformation now is finding innovative thinking that can stretch the organization. In other words, instead of working at optimizing incrementally, and remember, the whole world is moving with the speed of light. You cannot really, allow an organization to move at snail pace while everybody else is sprinting. And transformation disrupts the linear. Remember what I said about the linear earlier on. Transformation will decide the level and the approach that you adopt. So I see that as we move up with really excellence, maturity, targets will become meaningless. And the thinking that is used is really to disrupt in order to create a major leap, as opposed to achieve something against something that is fixed. And agility is about that. So agile thinking is responding because you have better insight, because you have a better idea, because you have a better method, and because you have leveraging. So instead of optimizing and it's going to take you time, you say, no, I'm not going to do it by myself. I'll bring a partner in and we can then jump with bigger leaps. So you don't focus on targets anymore. You focus on the leaps of performance and the maturity of your capability. So, I'm not sure I answered the question, but I think that that's really baseline now. Most of the criticism for target setting is that it is not based on logic. And most of it tends to be soft so that it's achieved. And it's a big, big distraction. I've seen so much data around organizations, and saying we achieve 90%, 95% of our targets have been met. So what? You're the same. You don't see any change. And what is important today is really to stretch. If there are any targets that are valid, that are useful to have, they will have to be reflecting high levels of ambition. They have to be what we call stretch targets. So that is really the best way I can answer the question.
Okay, Prof. We have another question from Hanan. She's mentioning in enablers pillar where we can find the risk management and business continuity practices.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm sorry, Hanan, I did not have time to go into the detail. there is a whole chunk on governance, which is integrated in the vision realization component first, and the main functions. But also there is risk assessment, risk management, and the future, and in strategic direction. So it is definitely there. If you had the chance to look at the manual for GEM 2.0, I think you will see that it is included there.
Okay, great, Prof. We have a question from Hiba. She says she's doing her PhD, and it's about leading excellence and empowering the government sectors in the UAE to achieve excellence in systems. So she's probably asking about where to point her through her thesis. Maybe as an academic.
I did not hear part of the question, Shama.
She's doing her PhD and she's wondering where she should start with excellence in the UAE. So it's more as an academic question. Maybe
it depends what she wants to do. I think that you know, excellence in the UAE is very rich as a philosophy, as a concept. It started in 1994. And the private sector, Dubai Quality Award is the oldest. And then in the government in 1997, the Dubai Government Excellence Program was launched. And with the Sheikh Khalifa Government Excellence Program at the federal level, it's in its nearly 12 years now. And Abu Dhabi government has got 10 or 12 years. And the Northern Emirates have got, so it depends. My advice is if you want to focus on the whole UAE, maybe you can do a comparative analysis basically of the various programs and the contributions they made in the development of the UAE retrospectively over the last 25 years or so. And then you can have different dimensions of evaluation. One in terms of the thinking, two in terms of excellence maturity and the achievement, three in terms of competitiveness, you know, how all of this investment over the last few years has propelled the UAE government to be amongst the top governments in the world. That's a broad theme. The reason I am suggesting it as a broad theme is because the ground is very fertile. There are you know, the data is not going to be a problem because it has been implemented broadly in most of the Emirates, if not all the Emirates, over a long period of time. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Professor. I hope also she will benefit from your suggestion. Let's take a couple of more questions because we passed our time. Irene is asking about the capabilities assessment. She says, if I was asked to determine one project that is linked to one of the pillars, is it right that I'm asked to do a charter that describes how it's designed, deployed, transforming, and how it's disruptive? And is it the same thing for catalyst and results assessment?
No, it's not as I said before, excellence is what an organization does every day. It's not linear anymore, and it's not about initiatives. It's not really about showing a project and what you've done with it. If it is capabilities, it's the core and most critical capabilities that drive an organization every day. It's what they do every day. So it's the know-how. It's not the what to do in order to achieve. It's the know-how itself. That's what is being evaluated. An organization that understands how to build excellence is one that knows how to define and structure its capabilities by developing them in the right way, by deploying them in the right way, by continuously learning and innovating so that they remain capabilities, and by nurturing them so they become distinctive, particularly the core capabilities, as I said. And then ultimately, when you have an advantage and you have well-identified capabilities that define your core business, then the advantage is to disrupt by bringing new thinking, by doing things differently and elevating the know-how or changing it with better know-how. That is really what is at stake here. And the same thing with measurement. As I said before, it's not about tracking the KPI and how fancy the KPI is and what it looks on a dashboard. It's really the value that we create, we generate. So capabilities drive performance via value creation. And unless we really change the mindset by measuring what is relevant, what we are tracking, as opposed to tracking the KPI and the data and then trying to read between the lines, that means we still need to understand the philosophy of measurement, in a more clearer way. It's not about, well, show me the proof. It's really about how do you do these things? It's an organization now doesn't have the burden of just printing tons and tons of documents and evidence for the assessors to see and evaluate. It's really about demonstrating how it operates on a daily basis as an ecosystem. So it has to define itself with its cumulative know-how, with the way it configures its main functions, with the way it attempts basically to be value-oriented and the way it develops unique services, the way it attempts basically to impact on enhancing the quality of life, and the way it stratifies the future as much as creating an insight for the present by being agile in its strategic thinking. It's really about all these things, and it's not about a project or an initiative or a system that we have purchased and we are implementing it. It's about the residual know-how that makes a difference to the organization.
Okay, great, Professor. So I think we're closing up this session, and thank you for everyone for attending. We'll make sure to send you the presentation from today's session, and we're sorry that we were not able to cover all of the questions that were raised from your side. You have our info@skgp.gov.ae email. Just drop us an email and we'll get back to you for your questions or inquiries. Thank you very much and have a good day to everyone. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Shamma. Thank you, everybody, and best of luck to all of you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Goodbye.